This is a report from ACM about Harry and Meghan and about a news report which went around the media in Australia and the United Kingdom and elsewhere about the move of Harry and Meghan to a house on the Windsor Street called Frogmore Cottage. And it consisted very much of fake news. So why did the media put round a story about the taxpayers having to pay for the renovations for this cottage? It just wasn't true. It is probably as untrue as many of the stories, the gossip about members of the royal family. The fact is, we have a self-funded monarchy. It's unique in the world. ACM now, for decades, has been almost alone pointing out that we Australians, just like the New Zealanders and the Canadians and the people of every other realm and the people of every other Commonwealth country, have this extraordinary advantage. We all pay nothing, nada, zilch, to the Queen or to members of the royal family. That's completely unlike the vast amount of money that the Australian taxpayers pour into the pockets of Australia's Republican politicians, which they then use to trash their oaths of allegiance to the Queen and to promote some politician's republic. But neither we nor the British taxpayer pay anything to maintain the royal family. Forget completely what some in the British media pay. It's untrue. The key report which brought this story into the media can be seen in the Daily Mail in Australia, Daily Mail Australia, published towards the end of last year, in which they said this, that the multi-million pound cost of the refurbishing of Harry and Meghan's cosy Windsor cottage is hidden from the British taxpayers who could be paying for this work. Now, there's no question about it. The British taxpayers were not going to pay. They were never going to pay. It was never planned. This was fake royal news, and we've complained about this sort of thing before. It usually starts in the British press and then it's taken over within the Australian media. And it's completely untrue. Here's what the Daily Mail said. Harry and Meghan held their wedding reception at Frogmore House, and then this overlooks the building where they would be going to live. That's Frogmore Cottage. And they then go on to say that a Kensington Palace spokesman said the costs of any substantial building would be covered by the sovereign grant. I'll come to that in a few moments. But then they go on to say, which is ultimately funded by the taxpayer. Nothing could be further from the truth. This is completely untrue. But then this was repeated over and over, and I first noticed it on Australian television, where people on a panel were sitting around talking about how terrible it was that the taxpayers would have to fund the renovation of this cottage. It is completely untrue. In fact, our monarchy, the Australian monarchy, and the British monarchy, and Canadian, and so on, has been self-funded for centuries. And it's like any other. And it's unlike our scheming politicians. The monarchy has been funding itself for centuries. It all began with King George III, whom you see here, and he reigned from 1760 to 1820. And what he did, he entered into an arrangement with the Parliament. He handed over the income of the Crown estate. That's all the various properties of the Crown all over Britain. He handed this over to the Parliament in return for the Parliament paying to him an annual amount to maintain the palaces and so on. It was called the Civil List, the quite famous Civil List. Since King George III, every monarch, down to Queen Elizabeth II, has entered into a similar arrangement at the beginning of each reign. It's important to note that they entered into an arrangement as to the income of the Crown estate, not the ownership of the Crown estate. And as the great historian in the 19th century, F.W. Maitland, affirmed, when it came to the title passing from Queen Victoria to the Prince of Wales, it was always open to the Prince of Wales not to sign such an agreement, to say, no, I'll take the income from all these properties, thank you very much, and I won't be needing a civil list. But he went ahead and did this, as did every other monarch, down to the Queen. But the monarchy is remarkable, it's self-funded, and we get something more. And that's all the benefit these days from tourism. For example, when Harry and Meghan went to Dubbo, Dubbo was not only in the Australian news, Dubbo was in the world news as it's never been before. Our royal family has the capacity, just by their presence, of attracting the world media and therefore the attention of the world to whatever they are doing. And if they're doing something in Australia, this has a tremendous boost to tourism. This is just one side advantages of our royal family, which the Republicans usually pretend doesn't occur. Now, as I said, every new reign, the King or Queen would enter into an agreement with the Parliament. But surprise, surprise, the UK politicians were failing miserably to maintain their side of the bargain. And this is particularly so in relation to the royal palaces, which are used for the purposes of the government of the United Kingdom, for example, for all state receptions, for receiving the diplomats, for giving awards, and for all sorts of functions. But the politicians are failing to keep their side of the bargain because Buckingham Palace, for example, was falling into what was clearly a dangerous condition. Chunks of masonry were falling off the building. One time it fell close to Princess Anne. It was in a very dangerous condition, as was the electricity, and that, of course, can lead to fire. They were not fulfilling their side of the bargain. And there was absolutely no question, never has been any question whatsoever, that the Crown estate does not belong to the government of the United Kingdom, it belongs to the Crown. And that has been very clearly established. Republicans sometimes say, oh, this is really state-owned. It's not owned by the government, it's owned by the Crown. They were personal properties of the royal family. They're held in trust within the Crown estate. So since 2012, a change was made. The situation was becoming appalling. The buildings were falling into a dangerous condition. What was decided then by agreement between the Parliament and the Queen, that thereafter the income of the Crown estate would go to the Queen, but it wouldn't be her discretionary income. She couldn't spend it as she wished. It would be used for the purpose of the maintenance of the royal family, and particularly, most importantly, all of the royal buildings, not the private buildings, not Sandringham, which is privately owned, but all of those which form part of the heritage of the United Kingdom. But the politicians decided then, even though it's not the Queen's discretionary income, to impose not ordinary tax, not the usual rate of tax. They decided on an exorbitant tax, a tax among the highest in the world. And this started out at 85 cents in the dollar. Can you imagine that? Imagine your income being subject to a tax of 85 cents in the dollar, that you could have 15 cents. And remember, this income is not for the Queen's personal benefit. This is to maintain the buildings, but of course also the immediate members of the royal family. 85 cents in the dollar, because there wasn't sufficient funds to do the requisite repairs necessary to these old buildings, Windsor Castle and Buckingham Palace in particular. It was decided to relax this, only temporarily, but to relax it, to a mere 75 cents in the dollar. Imagine if the government had took 3/4 of your income right from the beginning. Really an extraordinary thing. ACM has long argued that the income from the Crown Estate should go to the Queen. ACM's proposal is based on the fact that the Queen is our Queen too, as she is the Queen of Canada and the Queen of New Zealand, and so on. And we believe that she should be treated properly, because this income is not for her personal use. This is for matters relating to the Crown. And we believe that this should only be taxed at the appropriate rate of anybody else's property, anybody else's income in the United Kingdom, and not be subject to a draconian, exorbitant tax which is so large in the world. So now for ACM. In conclusion, may I invite you to join ACM. Joining ACM is free. It's always been free. We don't charge. We depend just on donations, and they are purely voluntary. And ACM has all the runs on the board. ACM doesn't chop and change on important matters of policy and doctrine. We haven't had several different positions on things which are crucial. We have one position. We have been audited every year since our inception in 1992. We are therefore squeaky clean. And we were the engine room for the referendum victory in 1999. So do go to norepublic.com.au, very simple, norepublic.com.au, join ACM and get to know what we are doing, and join us in the coming fight if there has to be a plebiscite, if this campaign to remove the Crown from the Constitution comes again. So until next time, may I suggest that you do two things apart from joining ACM. Remember, tell your family, tell your friends to vote no to the Politicians' Republic, and never ever give a blank check on the Constitution to those politicians whom you obviously cannot trust.